Hello, viewers of Spell. Today we are doing a little bit different from what I was originally planning on for this week, being the What If Midoriya Was a Jedi compilation video. I originally was going to have part 1 of What If Midoriya Was a D&D Sorcerer, but things started getting down to crunch time, so I decided to put this one out this week, and I'll put the other out next week. But without any further ado, if you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe. That is how I am able to tell whether or not you like this content. I'm also going to start reading comments if you have any questions. So, let's begin this video. We begin the day after the first hero course specific class and Midoriya and Bakugo's fight. Midoriya was meditating. He was glad they had won, but he was feeling bad thinking that he should have told Bakugo sooner. After all, he didn't really mean to deceive him. There was a lot to pack down with him having the Force. In fact, it was a concept he knew he would have a hard time explaining to others. Then he looked at the holocron he had brought out. It was one about lightsaber training, and it had helped him start to perfect his style. They called it Form 5, and maybe even some of what they also called Form 3. One being overly defensive, while the other was a mix of offense and defense. But he also was thinking of another thing. How would he use the Force? He already knew he had to disguise what his quirk was. He knew pro heroes who did it. That way the villains wouldn't have as much information on them. But even more than that, he had affinity with the Force beyond the average person. And the holocrons had mentioned powers that were for Jedi Masters, and even more that were classified as controversial or even forbidden. He was the only Jedi on the planet. The only one who went by the philosophy. And it had been nagging at him for a while. He had gotten to a certain level, but couldn't determine if he should observe the holocrons describing those techniques. Or even some of the ones that he had two that were labeled Sith holocrons. And while many of the holocrons described them as being tainted of the dark side, which Midoriya kinda understood. Though it did lead things into question whether or not he should observe them and decide for himself if they were abilities he wanted to use. After all, if they could be used to help people, were they truly evil? Not to mention, he had to take into account, he didn't know anything about the Jedi in truth, only what was there. What if it was just a bias? What if the Jedi just didn't want to tell people things, or keep their members in check? He sighed. He had had those thoughts for a while. After all, he didn't even have a master to teach him. As he heard his mother remind him to get ready, as he quickly prepared to head off to school. We flash over to UA, with Nezu talking to Aizawa. As Aizawa said, "What do you call me here for?" "Nothing much. I wanted to ask you about one of your students." Aizawa sighed. "If it's a Bakugo character, I was going to talk to him about it, make him under..." As Nezu shook his head. "No, it's the other one, the green-haired one." Aizawa looked at him. "You mean the kid with the telekinesis quirk?" "Kinda." As he pulled up an image of Izuku in the hero training. As he said, "Do you have any idea what's up with that saber made out of what seems to be light? It's not labeled on his hero equipment." Aizawa looked at it. Well, he must have made it. Is there something wrong? Is that thing... As the principal shook his head. No, it's the fact it's so effective. You would think if he made it, it would be a little, well, shoddier. Well, if he had made it with no assistance. The second thing is All Might wanted me to observe it. As Owl looked at him. Was there any particular thing? No, All Might picked up on something as he played the footage. Did you notice it? As Aizawa brought his head closer to the screen and moved it back 5 seconds. As he looked at it and said, I think. As Nezu nodded, All Might told me that they were apparently childhood friends, but it was still throwing him off. Seemingly, Izuku was moving before Bakugo even launched his attack. To be fair, someone who knows someone else very well should be able to do that, but to read someone's moves and react that quickly without a quirk that enhances your perception or speed. You think the kid has multiple quirks, or maybe some other? Snazu said, hard to say. With them being childhood friends, it is just possible Izuku can read him like a book. But it still doesn't quite sit right with me. As Azawa looked at him. Given the fact that your quirk allows you to calculate incredibly fast, that is kinda concerning. Either way, I want you to keep an eye on him. All Might thinks it might just be nothing, but I've watched all of his moves, and he has a similar reaction time to all of them, which is virtually instantaneous, because he starts moving to react before Bakugo does. As Nezu said, well, I need to prepare for my job, since I'm the principal of this school, and Eraser. I would recommend you get out there to make sure your students get into the school in time. As Eraser had sighed. I was just hoping it would be a couple of them. Is it that bad? I doubt they'll be able to get into the building. As the students were trying to make their way into the building, reporters were bombarding them, asking them questions about All Might. As Izuku was getting nearly harassed, he decided to wave his arm and say something he was questioning if he should do. But he did. As he said, there's no way I can know anything. You'll go and think of something interesting to say. As the reporter seemed to daze out and repeat what Izuku said, as he walked away. As Doria quickly hurried up, he was not thrilled to see even more around the gate. But he quickly saw Eraserhead approaching them, as he told them to basically get lost. Izuku would quickly rush around and get into the building. As he checked his schedule, as it wasn't going to be a very busy day, he hoped to see All Might again. But it seemed that Hero class wasn't going to be occurring today. He would hurry along to class, as it was a pretty normal day of school, as he sat for lunch with his newly found friends, Ida Tenya, Ochako Uraraka, and the girl he just knew as Toga. As the question brought around about people's families and quirks. Izuku was surprised he didn't notice it before, but Ida was actually from a generational hero family, and Ida had a speed enhancement quirk with pipes coming out of his legs. Midoriya had to admit, sometimes he did question how exactly did quirks occur, and Ochako's quirk was pretty powerful. As they asked Toga what her quirk was, she was nervous and mentioned that it was technically a type of shapeshifting, as Midoriya was quite excited to see such a vast variety of quirks. But Toga seemed to be nervous about her quirk. Midoriya had seen something similar with people who had a quirk, but it had some embarrassing requirement. Or people had previously ridiculed them for. As he looked over, and Ochaku seemed to have a similar reaction. Ida was hard to read on it, but he didn't push it. As Midoriya almost forgot that no one had asked about his quirk yet, as he kind of mentioned that his quirk's primary ability was telekinesis. As Ochaku said, primary? As he brushed the back of his head. Yeah, it's complicated, but I can do a few different things. Not just levitate objects. Ochaku seemed to nod. As the day would overall go without a hitch. The only thing was Aizawa mentioning they were going to be going on a trip tomorrow. As Midoriya would start to head out, his new friends would walk with him. And Toga would actually mention, "Hey Zuko, you want to hang out sometime outside of school?" Izuku was a bit shocked, as, he's like, sure, we can, do that. As Toga smiled, Midori going to school. And when he got there, Aizawa would announce to everyone that they were going to be going on a type of field trip to a facility that they refer to as the USJ. As they'd be heading there, a discussion about quirks would come up. And they would ask people, and this would pretty much stay the same as canon. But when they pressed Midoriya, he would just respond with them. He would be incredibly vague, with just saying that his quirk was more about taking in energy and then applying it to do different things. It was a very versatile quirk, with the others following along. As they would arrive at the USJ, walking into the building, they would see a Pro Hero 13. As she started explaining she would explain how her quirks works and how valuable it was to be able to control your quirk without hurting people around you. Midoriya would sense something dark as he would look out, as Aizawa would see this and say, "Midoriya, get back into the..." As he stopped. As Kirishima also said, "Does anyone else see that down there? I didn't realize we'd be having faux villains." As Aizawa would quickly pass 13 and ask her if All Might was anywhere in the building. She would silently whisper to him that he wore out his time limit. Despite Aizawa not really caring for All Might's bombastic personality and how connected he was to the media and all that, Aizawa would have really liked to have someone with his kind of power in a fight. As Aizawa looked around, noting that the security system wasn't going off, as he quickly said, "Everyone, try to call emergency services." As everyone started reaching for their phones and trying. As Aizawa started to hear replies saying, "No signal." As even Kaminari, using his radio, said, "Nothing. Just static." As he would quickly say, 13, protect the kids." As Midoriya would quickly say, "Let us..." Aizawa quickly shooting back with, "I can handle this. Go!" A pro hero needs to have more tricks up his sleeve than just his power. As he jumped down, using his quirk to cancel out other people's quirks, as he used martial arts to incapacitate everyone else. As everyone was about to run out of the building, a shadow would appear in their pathway. Midoriya was gonna try to use a forced push to push him away, but Bakugo and Kaminari would get in the way. They would also be in the way of 13 using her quirk, allowing Kogiri to teleport everyone around. Midoriya would try to push away the smoke, but he failed. It moved too quickly for him to push it away. As he would get teleported, he would quickly realize that he was underwater as he tried holding his breath. As a villain that looked like a shark would approach him, he would quickly use the force to push him away. and try to reach the surface. Tsuyu would quickly swoop in and grab him. They retreated to the ship in the middle of the shipwreck zone, as Midoriya would ask if they're the only ones there. As she nodded, Midoriya would quickly spread out his senses as he sensed multiple villains in the water. As Katsuyu would ask if he had any ideas about how to get out. Midoriya would be slightly distracted as he was worried about his friends. As he quickly started thinking of a plan. Looking at the situation, he realized the villains were hesitating on coming aboard. He realized that they didn't know what quirks they had. Midoriya wasn't barely hampered in the shipwreck zone, while Tsuyu had an advantage. Neither one of them had been sent to a zone that particularly impeded them. As Midoriya smiled, whispered to Katsuyu the plan. Then Midoriya quickly did a fake freak out, and him and Katsuyu started to act like they were panicking, and quickly ran into the ship. The villains, now confident that these hero hopefuls would be easy to defeat, as they destroyed part of the ship and rushed aboard the wreckage, only to not find anyone. Tsuyu and Midoriya had managed to sneak away by using his lightsaber to cut a hole in the bottom of the ship as they snuck out, as they would quickly manage to swim to the shore. Unlike in canon, they wouldn't be able to immediately see where Aizawa was. Midoriya would quickly tell Tsuyu to meet up with the others, as he decided to check to see how Aizawa was doing, as it wasn't very good. Aizawa was pinned to the ground by a large, black, purplish figure. A pale man with hands covering his entire body was gloating. The smoke villain also wasn't, but the white-haired man was saying something as Midoriya focused. As he said, "Eraserhead. It is quite annoying when heroes do live up to their hype. But, unfortunately for you, this will be the end of the road." As he quickly reached out his hand to Aizawa's face, Midoriya quickly realizing what he was about to do. Midoriya would rush forward. As he condensed the force to do something. In his hurry, he focused energy into his arm and released it, as it shot out as force lightning. It quickly impacted both the creature and the white-haired man. The man, being Shigaraki, would scream as bolts of electricity rushed through his body. The Nomu would also be affected, as Midoriya, being surprised, not intending on using force lightning, quickly stopped it, as a man he hadn't noticed before rushed at him. The man had his head almost completely covered with some sort of cape flowing behind him. He quickly slammed into Midoriya. Midoriya would quickly spin and ignite his lightsaber. The man would say, "I see. So you're," as Shigaraki would yell, "You brat! Nomu, get him!" Midoriya turned, unable to see the Nomu, but using his clairvoyance would roughly guess where he was, as he outstretched his lightsaber, as it impaled part of the Nomu. Unfortunately, it had only caught it in the shoulder, as its other arm came around and clocked Midoriya in the stomach, sending him flying back. As Midoriya would slam hard against the ground, skidding. Midoriya was about to black out. All he could do was pull on the force to try to sustain his body. Flashing over to Aizawa's perspective, he would see Midoriya get laid out by the Nomu. He had been blocking his quirk, but he was still strong enough to do that. As he was surprised to see Midoriya actually catch the creature catch him in his lower shoulder. As between that and hitting Midoriya, it nearly severed the arm. Aizawa would be almost horrified as he saw it slowly start to regenerate. The man with the fully covered mask would say, "You weren't supposed to do that." As Shigaraki said, "You're not the boss of me." As some of the villains Aizawa knocked out started to wake up, as despair started to fill him, but he noticed some of the ones near Midoriya were getting up but passing out mere seconds later. He wasn't sure what it was. He couldn't even be sure what he was seeing. His brain cloudy. The only thing keeping him conscious was the adrenaline pumping through his body. As soon as that was gone, he would be out like a light. Midoriya was foolish for helping him, but he also saw Midoriya's goal to help people, as the doors would quickly slam open as All Might would come rushing in. Here it would go like in canon, except though the man with the full head covering would escape with Shigaraki, Midoriya being taken to the hospital unconscious. Though, to the detective's surprise, the villains around him were incredibly weak, some even in critical condition, not from any physical damage, but instead, it was like their entire bodies had lost significant amounts of energy. As Midoriya was quickly taken to the emergency room, we'd see Toga come out of the USJ as she asked where Midoriya was. Uraraka would tell her that they had taken Midoriya to the hospital. As Toga would quickly rush to the hospital, there Midoriya would wake up, his wounds mostly healed. Only a few bandages to make sure nothing got moved out of place. As Recovery Girl said, "It's amazing. When you got here, I expected that you wouldn't make a quick recovery. But with my power and yours, it seems like you made a full recovery." Midoriya asked, "What do you mean?" "It seems that somehow you were already regenerating. I'm not quite sure what it was." As Midoriya's mother would come rushing in a minute later, saying, "Izuku, I'm so glad you're safe. Don't ever scare me like that again." As Midoriya would say, "Don't worry, Mom, I don't intend on it." As she said, "I did meet your friend while we were waiting for you to wake up." Midoriya would be surprised, as outside he would see Toga by the doorway. Midoriya would be surprised and said, "Toga, glad you're alright. What happened?" As Toga would actually fill him in. "Luckily, you were the only student with any form of serious injury. But Aizawa got banged up pretty bad. He's probably a few doors down." As Midoriya asked, "So what happened after I got knocked out?" As Toga explained that Ida managed to get help, but luckily for all of them, he ran to All Might on his way. And when All Might got there, he defeated that huge black thing and forced the others to retreat. Then the UA teachers came in and cleared out the rest of them. As she said, "Oh, there's someone from UA who wants to talk to you, Izuku." As Midoriya would move around, feeling a little weak thanks to the loss of energy that Recovery Girl used to heal him, but he just quickly used the force to enhance his body. Recovery Girl's surprised he could walk around like that. As this new yellow-haired man came in asking, "Do you mind if I talk to Mr. Midoriya alone?" As Inko would ask, "Why?" As the man would just say, "Just need to ask him a couple things, and he seems to be doing just fine." As Inko would nod and say, "I'll be right back." "Midoriya, do you want anything?" As Midoriya said, "No." As Inko looked at him and said, "I talked to Recovery Girl before you woke up. She told me that the way her quirk worked is that it relied on getting energy from your body, and that you should eat and drink something once you woke up." As Midoriya said, "Okay. I guess in that case, a soda and some chips or whatever good they have in the cafeteria." As Inko would smile as she left. As Inko would leave along with Toga, as the yellow-haired man would sit down and say, "Young Midoriya, I want to talk to you about something very important." As he would quickly bulk up. We start with Midoriya. He was at home thinking. They had canceled school for a week following the attack, both for people to not get overly stressed, and for them to thoroughly check school security. All Might about his greatest secret. He had a quirk that could be passed on, called One for All. He had offered it to Midoriya. Now, unlike in canon, Midoriya had a power. And All Might told him that, given his physical prowess, he should be able to take One for All rather quickly. Midoriya said he wanted some time to think, and he had come to a decision. He was going to accept One for All and the responsibility that came with it. He would be meeting All Might later that day, and according to what All Might said, he would have to ingest one of his hairs. Midoriya thought, that's a bit gross, but not the worst thing, as he was also pondering another thing. He had discovered a new force ability. The thing is, it drained life. He had used it subconsciously to try to help sustain his body at the end of the fight. He had also used Force Lightning. He was desperate, but still. Those two abilities were unnerving him. Though he wasn't sure if it was the light side variant of Force Lightning or the dark side. He had learned the light side variant. It required strong emotion that would release as pure energy. The only difference between light and dark side was the emotions drawn on. He had remembered some of the Jedi Masters saying that you should detach yourself from emotion, but Midoriya started to think about it, and that seemed like everything wrong. Like the Jedi themselves were cutting themselves off from the Force, from humanity. But yet, what they said about the dark side, he shook his head. Midoriya was determined. He would have to decide this at a later date. But for right now, he had to meet All Might. As he left home, he would meet All Might on the beach. All Might was in his skinny form. He realized he had sensed it about All Might, that in the Force itself, his injury resonated. As All Might said, "Alright, just eat this," as Midoriya took the hair and swallowed it. It felt nasty. As Midoriya just said, how long until I should notice an effect? All Might said, hard to say. A few hours, possibly. Your quirk's a little different, so it's possible that All for One might manifest slightly differently for you than me. Midoriya nodded. As Midoriya asked, was there anything else you wanted to ask me? All Might said, no. I'm glad with the choice I made. Some people who got One for All didn't even know the person they were inheriting it from. Compared to that, I've had the great pleasure of choosing my successor. Midoriya said, yeah, thank you for picking me, but did not slip his mind the wording about some didn't get to choose. As All Might said, school will start back up in 2 days. Don't forget, this is a secret. You can't tell anyone. Midoriya nodded, before saying, I should get going. That night, Midoriya would have dreams. Multiple lightsabers. Dueling. People he hadn't met yet. Death. Midoriya didn't know what to make of it. It hadn't been the first time he had a dream like this, but it was more vivid. A long white-haired man said, I'm surprised to see someone with this power. Before Midoriya would wake up, his room was a mess. It looked like his quirk went wild in his sleep. Scorch marks on the walls and things moved around. As Inko would rush in and see how Midoriya was doing. As Midoriya just said, I just had a bad dream. Inko would look at him and says, it's related to USJ. You don't. But Midoriya just waved his hand. No, it didn't have anything to do with that. I'm not sure. Inko said, do you want a glass of warm milk, or... Midoriya said no. I should be able to get back to bed. Thanks. As the next day, Aizawa would make an announcement. The sports festival was coming, and they should be getting ready. Midoriya felt elated, but he also felt an impending sense that things on the horizon weren't going to be kind. We begin this video with everyone in Class 1A preparing, thinking about their normal school life, along with the sports festival. The UA Sports Festival was an important time for the school. Primarily, it had all the students participate, and it has a variety of different challenges. Things got even more intense when they went to leave their classroom and other students were there. Midoriya sensed various emotions when he pushed the force out. He wasn't quite sure what it was. Not quite contempt, maybe a little jealousy. As Bakugo told everyone, "Get out of the way, extras." As Midoriya wanted to facepalm. Because of course, Bakugo's first reaction was antagonize the people who had gathered outside. But some people cleared out when Bakugo said this. As a purple-haired boy walked up and said, "You're pretty bold." As Bakugo was nearly replied before the boy continued. People have been removed from the hero track during the sports festival. They've also been people from general studies and other courses have been put into the hero course. Everything clicked together there for Midoriya. If some of the students gathered here did good enough, they would get put in the hero course. As shortly after that, Midoriya would notice that things were more tense around the school. Everyone seemed on edge. As only a week later, as he would chat with his friends and slowly start building up, how would he address the sports festival? As we flash to the day of the sports festival, as the students have been gathered, as President Mike explains, the first challenge of the sports festival is an obstacle course. As President Mike would ask Aizawa, who is still injured after his fight with the Nomu. "Now, Aizawa, what do you think is the first challenge the students are going to face is?" As Aizawa said, "The door." As everyone began crowding through the door, it turned into a traffic jam fast. Some people jumping above, flying. One guy even liquefied the ground and swam under it. Midoriya had a different strategy. He pushed. As he gathered the force, he would push in front of his body and push everyone who had gathered in front of him through the door. Midoriya thought it shouldn't be too bad, as a number of people got sent tumbling out and landed on their faces. People like Bakugo, Shoto, and other students had already gotten ahead of him. As he would think to himself, "Why didn't I just immediately do that?" As it would only take a minute for everyone unentangle themselves from the pile Midoriya pushed out and rush forward as well. As President Mike would say, I think Izuku Midoriya just uses quirk to push people out of the way." But, Aizawa, isn't it against the rules to attack your fellow participants with quirks? As Aizawa said, it wasn't an attack. He simply pushed them out of the way. It would be an attack if he tried holding them in place, or if he had used undue force. This would be no different than a trip. As the students rushed through, they would get to the first obstacle. As multiple robots, including 3 zero-pointers, would pop out of the ground. As Midoriya just looked at them and said, "I wish I had my lightsaber." As Shoto would freeze many of them. As other people would rush through, the robot would fall. Midoriya would try to use the force, but it was too heavy and falling too fast. It would crush 2 people. A few seconds later, both of them popping out, being Tetsu and Kirishima. both having powerful defensive quirks. Midoriya would quickly jump over them and try to maintain a lead. Meanwhile, Toga and Uraraka would be rushing through, both of them secretly agreeing to help each other, at least during the team portions, as the next obstacle would involve going over a ravine crossing using ropes. Midoriya would look down and see a 20-foot drop, as he quickly channeled the force and would make a jump, managing to get halfway across before crawling onto a central island before preparing to jump again, as he would see a pink-haired girl using a device to slide across on the rope. He would also see Uraraka and Toga both making their way across, assisting each other, as he would see Bakugo in the distance, keeping a very tight lead. Midoriya had grabbed a piece of a robot, thinking he might be able to use it in the competition. Rushing forward, putting all of his might into getting there, Midoriya would quickly stop at the next challenge, not seeing anything before Ida would shoot past him using his speed, before getting shot back with a mine. It had been a minefield. Midoriya blinked at the fact that, wait, UA seriously just put a minefield as part of a test? As students that had gotten ahead of him quickly started to have some issues. Even the boy that could liquefy the ground seemingly wasn't able to dodge all the mines. As Aizawa came on the loudspeakers, announcing this is probably the toughest challenge they have to face, given the fact that students in the head were actually at a disadvantage, not having any of the path cleared, as Midoriya knew he couldn't jump across. It was too large of a gap. He thought maybe he could use the force to explode the mines before he had a realization as he started digging up the mines. As Bakugo would shoot across the gap, Shoto would just grimace as he froze the ground, sliding over it to catch up with Bakugo. Both of them would be at the lead, as Midoriya would dig up a bunch of the mines, as he would mumble out, "Force, be with me," as he used the mines and the piece of metal he had and detonated them, as everyone was shocked at the size of the explosion, as Midoriya used that to send himself flying forward. He used the force to control his landing as he sailed past Shoto and Bakugo, using the force to enhance his body, and of planned timing, he would hit the ground and roll before rushing forward. Bakugo and Todoroki right on his heels, as they would all reach the finish line seemingly at the same time. As, over the loudspeakers, President Mike would say, "Wow! Aizawa, all three of your students were first. But who came in first place?" As he would examine the footage, as Midoriya had stuck out his arm just a little bit more and was crowned first, with many of the students coming in after from both Class 1B, Class 1A, with only a handful of general studies students. As Midoriya was feeling pleased with himself, managing to win the obstacle course, with the staff giving everyone a minute of breather, midnight would announce the next competition, a game of chariots, with the team having points based on where they came in the foot race. Midoriya was excited, until midnight revealed that the person who scored number one had 1,000,000 points and had by far the most points of anyone in the competition, as Midoriya, even without his ability to sense people's emotion through the Force, managed to sense the hostility in everyone around him, feeling like 100 eyes gazed on him with hungry expressions. Though he knew, in truth, it was less than 50 people, he was pretty sure some of the people in the crowd were also watching him with great interest. As we flash to a man covering most of his face discreetly, as he said, "Quite an interesting show, young Jedi. Perhaps you might be a proper rival one day. Or perhaps join me." As the competition began, or more specifically, the competition to find the people for the competition. As students ran around trying to get people to join, Bakugo and Todoroki were everyone's first choice, while Midoriya was left a little high and dry for people to join. After all, who wanted to join the person with the outrageous amount of points? But he was approached by just enough people. Toga, Ochako, and Tokuyami. As he assembled his plan, other groups would form, as the all-out brawl of this event would occur, with many attacking him first, as Todoroki managed to separate them from Deku with a string of ice. Midoriya was puzzled for a second before he saw Todoroki coming at them in full force, as he realized that he wanted all of the points for himself, and that they were now trapped. Meanwhile, Bakugo would be tearing through the competition, using Sero's tape, along with a girl from the support course's gadgets to maneuver around the stadium, tearing apart the competition by stealing headbands left, right, and center. While other teams relied on subterfuge and stealth, many just ran at their opponents, sparking mini brawls with people trying to grab at each other's headbands with the points, and some employing their quirks to great effect. Many of the surviving support and general study students were being picked off quite rapidly in this competition. As Todoroki would come at Midoriya, Midoriya would just tell Uraraka now, as she would use her quirk to put all of them in zero gravity. As he would use the force to push off the ground, sending them flying over the ice wall. Instead, now just trapping Todoroki with his own ice. As Midoriya would use the force to yank a couple headbands from other groups, Todoroki would surprisingly manage to get over the wall and come right at them. As Midoriya pulled on the force, Todoroki would bring his hand up as it would light up with fire. Midoriya would be surprised with this as he released a force push. The force would manage to push the flames back and destabilize Todoroki's balance, giving them a minute to gain more space. As Todoroki would push forward, as Ida would reveal his trump card. Cipro burst as he rushed forward. As Midoriya would try defending the headband he held, Todoroki would grab it. Midoriya, using the force to grab a couple headbands from Todoroki, but only managing to catch a couple. They had lost the 1 million headband before it was revealed that Tokuyami had managed to grab it. Midoriya sighed in relief, as he managed to thank everyone for their hard work, as being able to grab that had secured their place in the next round. And that's where we're going to leave it. Congratulations for getting this far in the video! And like I said before, beginning, like, sharing, and commenting, and especially subscribing, all help with the channel and the YouTube algorithm. And I'm going to start reading off the comments you leave underneath the videos, if it's a question or a comment about the series itself. And without any further ado, I hope you have a wonderful day. The Spell Re, signing off.